Okay, so we're looking at Unit 1, the camera, and one of the assignments that we're going to work on today is how to explore your camera and take pictures of the different settings in your camera and post them onto your Google site. So this is what the final product should look like for this work. It is inside my portfolio on the photography page, and this is going to be Unit 1, the camera. And inside I have 11 pictures that I took of my camera, and the 11th one is an optional one, so actually only 10 are required for this lesson. Let's look at the 11 pictures that I have up here. One is I want to see the front of your camera, the back of your camera, the highest ISO, the lowest ISO. And I'll go ahead and point to it. The highest ISO is right up here. The lowest ISO is here. The fastest shutter speed is right here, and the slowest shutter speed is here. Smallest aperture is 22. Largest aperture is 1.4. And this is how I set it to manual setting, and here is how I set it to the monochrome setting, which is the same thing as black and white. And then this last picture, I created a tripod. So this is what the end product should look like. Let's take a look at how we're going to find those settings on your camera. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this camera that I have. This is a digital SLR, and mine in particular is a Canon. So if you have a Nikon or any other version of an SLR, you're going to want to look at your manual to see how to find the different settings on your camera. I like to take my lens cap off for this so that you'll be able to see through the LCD screen on the back. Okay, so as of right now, this camera is turned off. The way you turn it on is right here. And probably a lot of the cameras are similar to that. The first thing you'll want to do is take a picture of the front of your camera. I like to be able to see what lens you have and the model number on there, and then take a look at the back. I want to get a picture of the back so I can see what you're working with throughout this class. So those are two easiest pictures you can take. Use your cell phone to do that. The next one is finding ISO. And we're going to learn more about ISO in the third unit. But for right now, what I want us to do is find out where the ISO is. On the back of the camera, I have it set right here so that you can see the settings. Now, if I switch right here, that turns it to video settings. And if I switch it back, it goes to camera settings. So a lot of my settings are right here, but they're also really easy and set up right up here too. So there's two ways you can look at your settings in this camera. Every camera will have a different option. Of course, when I'm shooting, you typically use this setting right here to look at it because it's a lot quicker to go from this eyepiece to up here than it is to pull out and to look at the back of the screen. Okay, so we're going to find our ISO. Just to let you know, on this menu right here, you can see ISO is written right here. Right now, it's currently set ISO 400. And we're going to learn how you can set that. Notice up here, I have an ISO button. Okay. I also see my ISO written right here. And I'll show you on this older Canon camera, there's actually an ISO button on the back. You can see that. So yours might be in a different location. You would just click that button and you can make that option. All right, so let's take a look at the top because that's where I'm going to set my ISO. I push the ISO. And now I use this scroll right here to scroll to see which one I want. Okay, my highest ISO is going to be the highest number. Mine is 25,600. So I'll take a picture of my camera set at that ISO. Now, notice that it went right back to the setting and I can no longer alter my ISO. So what I'm going to do is I have to push it again. If I want to alter it again, I push it, and then I'm going to slide it all the way down to find my lowest ISO. My lowest ISO is 100. It is not A. A means automatic ISO. You do not want any automatic. Your lowest ISO for this camera is going to be 100. Take a picture of that. On the back, it will also show up. Do you see it right here? ISO 100. Okay, so now that we know how to set our ISO, how do we set our shutter speed? Okay, so shutter speed is indicated on this camera. Show you upside down here. Shutter speed is that number 30 right there on this camera. Okay, shutter speed. And on the back, you can see it's actually indicated 1/30. So actually, shutter speed is illustrated usually through a fraction, 1/30. But to make it easier for the top part, they just say 30. So it's a little bit confusing, and you have to be careful that you're not doing 30 seconds. You know, this is actually 1/30. This shutter speed is actually set to 1/30. And now on this camera, how do we set the shutter? It's on the manual setting right here. Do you see that's on manual? You want to make sure while you're doing any of this assignment today, you are working in manual. I forgot to mention that earlier. Work in manual because then you can set all your manual settings. If you can't set something, it's probably because you're not in manual. Okay, so now I want to change the shutter speed. This one is pretty easy because all you have to do is move this. Okay, this is on the Canon camera. Every single camera is different. So you can see here, the fastest shutter speed is going to be 1/4000. And look how it shows up on the back. Oops. There it is. 1/4000. Notice on the top, it shows up as 4000. Okay, so 1/4000 on the back. Again, I have to push the Q button so you can see it. 1/4000 is the same thing as 4000 on the top. It is represented as a fraction. So that is 1/4000 of a second. So take a picture of that. Now I want you to adjust all the way down to the slowest shutter speed that you have. Some cameras will go all the way down to something called B for bulb. And some cameras will just go down to like 15 seconds. This one goes all the way down 30 seconds. Those two marks after the 30 represents seconds. So this means the shutter is open for a whole 30 seconds. That is the slowest shutter speed that my camera does. Okay, so after you've taken those, the last two functions I need you to find is your aperture. Aperture is right next to shutter speed on this Canon camera. You can see, whoops, right there. It says 5.0. That is the aperture. And on the back, push the Q button. Notice it says f5.0. Anytime you are looking for your aperture, it is also indicated by an F, or f-stop is another word for it. So if you look for F, it is also actually written in both forms, and but it's pretty easy to identify because it's usually in a 0.0 or point something, okay? This one is 5.0. On this camera, it's actually pretty tricky how to set your aperture. If you have a Canon camera, the way you have to do it is hold down this star right here, and then at the same time, rotate. Okay, I'm going to show this to you again. Hold down the star button, and then rotate. Sorry, there you go. Okay, that is actually the largest aperture, 1.4. And then the other direction, the smallest aperture is 22. So ironically, the smaller the aperture, the larger the number. So this confuses a lot of my students. But you can think of it as a fraction as well, because what you're doing with your aperture is you're cutting down the opening right here, just like this. And so you're cutting it down a fraction. So this would be f22, and then all the way open would be more like f1.4. Okay, so find your highest aperture and your lowest aperture. Now, just to let you know, when it comes to the SLR cameras, if you have a lens that can zoom in and zoom out, your aperture settings will change depending on how far in or how far out you have it zoomed. Okay, so let's take a look at this camera here. Has a zoom lens on it. And I want you to see it says 3.5 to 5.6. That means at its widest angle, you can get all the way down to 3.5. And at its most telephoto version, it's going to be at 5.6. Okay, so those are the options. So when you're buying your lens and setting up your aperture, you're going to be looking to see what you can get. On mine, it says I can get all the way down to 1.4, but this is a fixed lens, which means that it does not zoom in or out. It's a fixed lens. It only has one measurement, 50 millimeters right here. So I cannot zoom in or zoom out on this camera. Okay, so those are the main settings I need you to find. Now, you also need to prove to me that you can find your manual setting on your camera. Different cameras might have it in different locations, but set it to M and take a picture. And then lastly, I want you to be able to show me where you find black and white setting. I really love shooting in black and white. I hope you'll enjoy it too. Black and white is very good at teaching composition skills, so I want you to be able to know where to find it. So on this camera, every camera is going to be different. On this camera, I'm going to select the menu button. Okay, and then I can scroll over. Sorry, I'm going to leave it right here. I can scroll over to different settings. These are my play settings, and these are my shooting settings. In the Canon camera, you go to picture style, and then you can choose different picture styles that you have in here. Okay, this will set your camera up using different programs in order to make the picture of your choice. So this one is monochrome, and now it is ready to go. And if you move it here, take the picture. Whoops, I got it set to 30 seconds. Let me just show you really quick. And it's a black and white picture back there, okay? So I want you to show me that you have it set to the monochromatic setting. And then finally, the last thing I need you to do is be able to know how to put it onto a tripod. Putting it onto a tripod, you always open up the top part first, and then you open up the bottom part. The reason is this is more fragile and less stable, whereas this is stronger, okay? And the inside, you can tighten this down so that it does not open and close. This, if you loosen it here, you'll be able to crank it up. I only crank it up as a last minute resort, okay? I only do that if I really need to get it higher. This, I twist and I can turn it up and down. And then here I loosen this up and I can turn it side to side. And then most will have a function where you can turn it sideways as well, so you can do a portrait shot if you wanted to. But how do you get it onto the tripod? You have to take off the release. So I first take off the release, and this is what I need to put onto the bottom of my camera. So I'm going to turn off my camera so I don't waste any batteries. And you find the bottom of your camera. There should be a place where you can screw in your tripod release, and you twist it in place. You don't want it too tight because you'll regret it. You want it tight, but you don't want it too tight. So just snug like that. And make sure this lays flat. And then you're going to put it back in here by sliding it back in place and then locking it in. And now you've got it set up on a tripod. But just a word of caution, you never want to walk around just holding it like this because this is not very stable. If you ever do need to walk around, take it off the tripod first. You can leave the cable release in there if you plan to use it again. But don't leave this and lose this, because then your tripod becomes useless. So those are the 11 pictures I want you to work on. Get them uploaded to your Google Sites, and make sure you submit it into Google Classroom. Thank you.